Okay, so if I told you that I'm tired of making this video, would you believe me? What if I told you that because of my own ineptitude, I have made this video 3 times, and this is time number 3. Would you like to see me speaking completely blankly to a screen while trying to play this deck out and trying to teach you how to play this deck with no audio whatsoever? Would you like to see me explaining this exact deck to you in detail without actually being able to explain anything in the deck because it's completely blank? It's bereft of audio. There's nothing there. So this is what happens when a YouTuber has to reset something in their computer, and as a result, really just wants to start working and get a video done. And, well, instead of getting that video done, I ended up just recording this video once with no audio, seeing that my stream deck had a mute button turned on and going, oh shit, I fucked up. That's 2 hours of work down the drain. Let me go ahead and hit the record button, hit the mic button, and do it again. And, well, when I did that, my throat hurt a lot. And I realized, in so doing, I've made a huge mistake. I didn't have my microphone set at all because my microphone goes through an audio pass-through, a Scarlett Focusrite that my computer could no longer read for some reason. I say all this to say, there was a preamble about this video, about the history of Magic the Gathering, the color pie, and how enemy colors were the focus of Arcavios, the plane where Strixhaven takes place. My want to make a Strixhaven series with the 5 Elder Dragons of Strixhaven, and there was a joke in there thrown at J.K. Rowling's expense because Harry Potter's a good book series, but the author's a transphobic piece of shit. I wanted to include all of that in the preamble for this, but after recording it twice, it just doesn't hit the same. So instead, we're going to talk about Beledros Witherbloom, one of the fun as hell commanders from Strixhaven. One of the 5 Elder Dragons birthed from the snarls of coalescing mana in Arcavios. And that's it. No more preamble. I'm going to start recording now before my throat wants to seize. Beledros Witherbloom is a Golgari and 5 flying behemoth of a commander with the ability to generate a pest token, a 1/1 black and green creature that gives you a life when it dies, every player's upkeep. That means 4 pest tokens a turn cycle. You can pay 10 life to untap all lands you control, and you can only activate that ability once per turn, though we have some ways of fudging that in this deck. There are a few ways to build Beledros Witherbloom that is incredibly powerful. One of these ways is Aristocrats, the way we're going to be focusing on, but if you want to build her, you can build a go-wide overwhelming style deck with Overrun and Overwhelming Stampede effects. You also have the ability to use her as a stompy go-big deck with life-gaining dinosaurs and stuff like that, so that you have the life to pay into untapping her abilities over and over again. Decks like this would use mana doublers and some consistent draw like Garruk's Uprising in order to constantly put new threats on the board. This kind of deck is probably more of a Timmy-style deck that focuses on big numbers, but that's not what we're building today. We are building Aristocrats, which is a deck theme focused on making sure that Aristocrat cards, like this Falconwrath Noble, can get their effect triggers. Most Aristocrats tend to deal damage as a death of 1,000 cuts, and they tend to focus on sacrificing our own resources in order to make that death of 1,000 cuts happen. So let's go ahead and go over each and every one of these, beginning with the Falconwrath Noble. The Noble says whenever another creature dies, each of our opponents will burn for 1, or one opponent will burn for 1, and we will gain 1 life. Zulaport Cutthroat makes our opponents all burn for 1, and we gain 1 life when a creature of ours dies. Bastion of Remembrance does the same thing while also making a token. Poison Tip Archer does the same thing without giving us life, and Mirkwood Bats burns everybody for 1 when we make a token or when we sack a token. For cards like Zulaport Cutthroat that give us lots of life gain, we also have cards like Death Greeter that just give us the life gain if another creature is put into the graveyard from anywhere. And to make use of the life gain from cards like this and the Prosperous Innkeeper that give us a treasure and also give us life whenever creatures enter the battlefield, we have Marauding Blight Priest, Dina Soulsteeper, and Starscape Cleric. Each of these will give us a point of burn to all of our opponents anytime we gain life. And in the event of having Starscape Cleric, we can have Offspring so we can get doubling up on this effect, and Dina Soulsteeper gives us the ability to burn our opponents while also letting us sacrifice our own creatures, so she is both burn enabler and sack outlet. All in all, this should mean that we are able to slowly whittle our opponents away with lots and lots of burn damage while maintaining the life we need to untap our lands with Beledros. But we also sometimes need ways to kill our opponents outright, and so we have a single oops I win card in Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Gary says that every opponent will burn for X life, and we will gain however much life we burned our opponents for, based on our devotion to black. So with just our commander and Gary, that's a devotion of black to 3. Meaning that we will burn our opponents for 3 and gain 9 life, which can be incredibly important if you happen to throw things like Sanguine Bond in this deck. Speaking of sacrificing our own things, which we will be able to do multiple times with cards like Dina, Grey Merchant of Asphodel benefits a lot from being sacrificed. If we throw it into the graveyard and then reanimate it, we will get its effect multiple times a turn, as there is no limit on what it can or cannot do. In order to revive Gary and other cards like him, though, we are going to need a pretty good recursion package. Let's go ahead and use Vat of Rebirth as our starting piece. Whenever another artifact or creature is sent to the graveyard, we add an oil counter to the Vat. We can then pay 3 mana and 4 oil counters in order to revive any creature from our graveyard to the battlefield at sorcery speed. Altar of Baal does similar, but instead of oil counters, it cares about exiling a creature we control for its cost. We're going to get rid of tokens for this card. Deadly Brew and Rise of the Witch King sacrifice permanents on our board in order to take permanents from our graveyard and put them either on the battlefield or in our hand. Victimize lets us sacrifice a creature to revive 2 creatures from the grave. Timeless Witness lets us take any card from our graveyard and put it in our hand as soon as we drop it on the battlefield, and Vane Witch Coven will let us do that with creatures every time we gain life, so long as we pay 1 black mana into it. With all of that reviving, we need ways to get creatures into the graveyard, and that's where our 6 sack outlets come into play. Dockside Chef is the first one, allowing us to sack creatures or artifacts to draw a card. Vampiric Rites lets us sacrifice creatures to draw a card and gain a life. Viscera Seer, Phyrexian Ghoul, Yahenni, and Woe Strider can all sacrifice creatures with no cost, but each of them has some sort of supplementary effect in doing so. Woe Strider makes tokens and also scries us cards when we sack creatures. Viscera Seer happens to be very low mana. Phyrexian Ghoul can make itself gain +2/+2, sometimes letting you swing for lethal with it, and Yahenni gives himself a 1/1 counter anytime an opponent has a creature die, but if we sack a creature, Yahenni will gain indestructible until end of turn, allowing us to keep our sack outlets out even if we suffer a board wipe. And while our commander does make plenty of tokens, we do need more ways to summon tokens besides just Beledros. So to facilitate that, we have a few cards to talk about. One of them is Ghoulish Procession, which gives us a 2/2 black zombie creature token anytime a creature dies. We can only do this once per turn. Golgari Germination makes us a 1/1 green Saproling token anytime one of our non-token creatures die. Ophiomancer makes a black snake with Death Touch every upkeep, so long as we do not currently control a snake. Ogre Slumlord gives all of our rats Death Touch, which means nothing except for the fact that it gives us a 1/1 black creature token every single time any non-token creature on anybody's field dies. And then Verdant Force says at the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token, meaning this is the same rate of return as our commander, and really the only way to power up this effect is to add something like a Wolverine Riders into the deck. That all said, that means we should have plenty of tokens, plenty of ways to sacrifice them, and plenty of ways to get back our important game pieces, and plenty of ways to burn our opponent out with these effects. But as you know, that's not enough to make a game plan work. We need ways to draw cards, and we need ways to remove our opponent's pieces from the game board. So let's go ahead and get into that draw strategy first. Because we have the ability to scry and also draw with some of our sack outlets, we can go a little lower on draw than normal. We are running 9 pieces of draw power in our deck, beginning with Village Rites. This lets us sacrifice a creature to draw 2 cards. This effect is copied amongst cards like Deadly Dispute and Eviscerator's Insight, and modified when it comes to cards like Plumb the Forbidden, which says that we can sacrifice any number of creatures in order to draw 1 card and lose 1 life for every creature we sacrifice. This means with Plumb the Forbidden, we can sometimes pay 2 mana and end up drawing 10 cards. It's a fantastic card in its own right. Then we have Into the Pit, which lets us sacrifice any non-land permanent in order to cast any card from the top of our deck, as long as we pay its mana value as well. This is a budget version of a Bolas's Citadel, but you can definitely run it alongside a Bolas's Citadel to great effect. Then we have Morbid Opportunist. This card will let us draw a card anytime a creature dies, but only once per turn. Deathreap Ritual does the same thing, but only during the end step. Harmonize lets us draw 3 cards just for paying 4 mana into it, and Moldervine Reclamation allows us to draw a card and gain a life every time one of our creatures dies. That is a fantastic amount of draw, and we should be able to benefit from all of this in order to get deep into our deck and get all of our win conditions out on the board. Now, that's not enough to win a game, though. Let's remove our opponent's pieces so that they can't win the game ahead of us. Removal is important, and because of that, we are running 12 pieces of removal, not counting our board wipes, and we're trying to make sure that every one of these pieces of removal has some type of supplementary effect for our deck on top of just removing our opponent's cards from the board. In the case of Accursed Marauder, Demon's Disciple, and Plaguecrafter, these make every player sacrifice a creature when they come out. They also have added benefits you can see when you read the cards. Plaguecrafter can make people discard if they don't have anything to sacrifice. Accursed Marauder only gets rid of non-tokens. Demon's Disciple can get rid of planeswalkers, but the most important thing is these will throw themselves or other important game pieces of ours, like, say, Grey Merchant of Asphodel, into the graveyard when we need to. If we need to get rid of artifacts and enchantments, we have Feed the Swarm to hit enchantments and creatures, Putrefy to hit artifacts or creatures, and Cankerbloom to blow up artifacts or enchantments by sacrificing itself. For cards that have added utility for removal, we have Death Sprout to get rid of a creature and then get a land, Binding the Old Gods, which lets us get rid of a creature or any non-land permanent and then get a land out from our deck on the following turn, Savra, Queen of the Golgari, which says anytime we sacrifice a green creature, we gain a life, and then when we sacrifice a black creature, everybody sacks a creature with us, and Butcher of Malakir, which makes everybody sack a creature with us anytime we lose a creature for any reason at all, so long as it is considered dying. Past that, we have Hagra Mauling, which has added utility of being a murder on one side and a Hagra Blood Pit land on the other side, and Mortality Spear, which can be a 4-mana remove any non-land permanent card, or a 2-mana remove any non-land permanent card so long as we have gained life this turn. All in all, this should be plenty of removal to make sure that we are able to stop our opponents from winning the game on their own turns, but we still need some other ways to supplement that, which is why we have the board wipes of Gaze of Granite and Necromantic Selection. The selection makes our opponents and us lose all of our creatures, and then we get to revive 1 creature from among the lot onto the battlefield. Please note, most of the time we're going to use this to reset our commander's untap ability, but sometimes we're going to use this to steal our opponent's commanders. Because the destroying all creatures and reviving a creature happen in the same paragraph of the card, there is never a point in time where our opponents can move their commander from the graveyard to the command zone during the zone-changing process of commander. This means that Necromantic Selection will always be able to steal a commander when it throws things to the graveyard. Gaze of Granite blows up all non-land permanents with mana value X or less, meaning that decks that benefit greatly from having lots of artifacts or enchantments on the board can still be stopped by our board wipes. All in all, that's a lot of ways to remove problematic cards from a board, but we still need more. We still need to be able to ramp up to our 7-mana commander, so let's talk about doing that. Our commander is very expensive, so while most Aristocrat decks can run about an 8 to 10 card ramp package, we are running a 13 card ramp package, because again, we have a very expensive commander to get online. We begin with Soul Ring because I hate myself, then we have Galagreeters, which gives us a treasure or gains us 2 life anytime a creature touches the battlefield once a turn, Insidious Roots, which makes all of our tokens tap for mana and also gives us the ability to spawn tokens if we do graveyard shenanigans, Rampant Growth gets a basic land out of the deck onto the battlefield, Sakura Tribe Elder does the same thing, Search for Tomorrow does it, but puts it on the battlefield untapped and lets us pay 1 mana to play it on turn 1. Wood Elves can get a forest from the deck onto the battlefield untapped. Cultivate, Heaped Harvest, and Kodama's Reach both get 2 lands out, but have varying ways of playing the second land. Heaped Harvest you pay an extra 2 mana to get the extra land on the board, and Kodama's Reach and Cultivate just drop it into our hand to play on a following turn. Then we can play 2 lands a turn with cards like Explosive Vegetation, Hunting Wilds, and Sky Shroud Claim. With the Sky Shroud Claim and Hunting Wilds being able to grab forests from the deck, meaning that we can yank dual lands out of our deck with these just as easily as any actual forest. Speaking of forests, we only have 47% of our deck represented by green mana symbols, but that doesn't mean that we need to be low on green mana, because most of our ramp we need early is still green. So we are going to lean a little heavier on forests with 9 forests and 8 swamps. Past that, we have 8 dual lands to talk about. Command Tower and Exotic Orchard need no explanation. They are coming to play untapped lands. Tainted Wood can tap for green or black if we have a swamp. Necroblossom Snarl is thematic, as it is the Snarl of mana above Strixhaven, while also letting us get a Swamper Forest in our hand, reveal it to our opponent, and cause the Necroblossom Snarl to come into play untapped if we do so. Haunted Mire always comes into play tapped, but we can get it out with 4 searching cards. Viridescent Bog is a great filter land we have access to, finally. Golgari Rot Farm will allow us to replay utility lands later in the game, and Temple of Malady is here because, well, I couldn't fit a Surveil land in at this budget. Screw you, Wizards. I would like those cards cheaper now, please. Anyway, we have 5 fetching lands to talk about as well. Promising Vein and Shire Terrace are both the same card, effectively, being a 1-mana colorless card that we can pay a mana into to grab a basic land from the deck and throw it onto the battlefield. Evolving Wilds can search for any basic land in the deck easily. Myriad Landscape and Blighted Woodland do the same thing, but we have to pay mana into them, and they get 2 basic lands instead of 1, effectively allowing them to ramp us. Past that, we have 4 utility lands. Pit of Offerings allows us to get rid of cards in graveyards. Ominous Cemetery allows us to get rid of creatures on the board. Mossfort Bridge allows us to cheat creatures onto the battlefield. And Grim Backwoods gives us an extra sack outlet. And I know that's a lot of mana to think about, but the most important mana is the mana you untap with the commander. So let's go ahead and do a quick game to show you how that plays out. Let's talk keepable hands, and the most important thing you can have in this deck is early access to mana ramp so that our commander can get online quick. We'd also like removal spells, but we've got a very, very interesting opener with Insidious Roots coming onto play on turn 2 if we get the land for it. A lot of colorless lands with Myriad Landscape and Shire Terrace, but the potential of a very explosive start with these. I think we go ahead and hold on to this hand and see where it takes us. We draw a Blighted Woodland, so let's go ahead and play a Blighted Landscape or a Myriad Landscape on the battlefield and move to turn 2. That gets us a Rampant Growth, and as much as I would like to play the Rampant Growth right now, we literally don't have the colors for it. So we're going to crack the Shire Terrace and go into our deck and get a green mana so that we can use the Rampant Growth on a following turn. We are on turn 3, and we're going to go ahead and play the Blighted Woodland now. Now we can go ahead and tap 3 and crack the Myriad Landscape in order to get 2 lands out of our deck. They're going to both be swamps. Now that we've moved on to turn 4, we have a couple of choices to make. We can use the Blighted Woodland to ramp further, but we're missing the lands to do so. So instead, we need to go ahead and play our Hagramaling down as a land so that we did not miss our land drop this turn. We're then going to pay the Swamp to go ahead and put Vat of Rebirth out so we have access to that on a later turn. And we are going to go ahead, well, actually, no, we're not going to do the Vat of Rebirth. That would be the incorrect move. We're going to go ahead and pay 4 to play Explosive Vegetation. This will allow us to get a swamp and a forest out of the deck so that we can go ahead and have them for our subsequent turn 5. And now that we're on turn 5, we have 7 mana we can use, so let's go ahead and drop our commander out 2 turns early. And on priority, we're going to use her ability to lose 10 life and get all of that mana back. And that was my cat hitting my thing, which is just fantastic. Now that we have all this mana, we have a couple of options. We can go ahead and play the Death Reap Ritual or Grey Merchant of Asphodel, but it's a bit early to need to do any of that. I think the correct move is to pay 1 and get Vat of Rebirth online. Then we're going to pay 2 and Rampant Growth to get another land out of the deck, and then we're going to pay 4 and put Mirkwood Bats on the board. This is going to start the clock for our opponents. Now they are going to start losing 1 life every time we generate a token. This means once we hit turn 5 or turn 6, we will have 4 pest tokens and have burned our opponents for 4 life. Now, we have a couple of options with our hand as it is. Our Vat of Rebirth has nothing to fuel it yet, but we have a Verdant Force in hand. We can play this Verdant Force and force our opponents to start burning way, way faster. And in fact, I think that's probably going to be the correct thing to do. So we're going to pay 2 mana and play Insidious Roots. Now our creature tokens, our pests, can tap for mana on their own. So we'll pay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we're going to play Verdant Force. We will then tap our Blighted Woodland, and 1 mana, and we have 2 mana floating. We'll then pay 10 life to untap all of our lands. Now that all of our lands are untapped, we can go ahead and sacrifice the Blighted Woodland by paying 2 more mana. Well, we need one of them to be green. And with that 2 more mana, we'll get 2 more lands out of the deck, meaning we'll have better access to good draws in the following turns. Now, I'm going to be grabbing only swamps out of the deck because we have so much forest grab in the deck as well. So if we run out of basic lands, I would rather run out of swamps before we run out of anything else. We'll then pay 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll go ahead and put Death Reap Ritual on the board. Now, if any of our things die, we'll at least be able to replace them. But in the meantime, as we move into subsequent turns, we will generate 4 pests and 4 sapperlings, burning our opponents for 8 life thanks to the Mirkwood Bats. This means our turn 6 board looks like this. We have an Insidious Roots giving us lots of mana on subsequent turns, a Vat of Rebirth so that if our creatures die, we can revive them, a Death Reap Ritual letting us draw cards if any of our creatures die, a Mirkwood Bats burning our opponents for every single time that a creature touches the board, and we have 2 creatures spawning lots and lots of tokens for us. We open up our turn, drawing a forest, and let's go ahead and pay 1, 2, 3, 4, and put Falconwrath Noble on the board. Now if any of our creatures die, we will burn our opponents for an additional 1, gaining an additional 1 life. And let's go ahead and exhaust our hand to put our opponents further on the clock. Let's put Gary on the board. Gary will see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Devotion to Black when he comes out, burning our opponents for 8 each and gaining us 24 life, putting us back up to 44, assuming nobody has hit us yet. Now we are in a dominant position. We may not have any ability to draw cards yet. We may be exhausted of cards in our hand, but if our opponents try to board wipe us, we can threaten killing the player who board wipes us with our Falconwrath Noble. We also have our players on a clock, burning 8 damage every turn cycle. They only get 5 turns after this before they die if they don't have any life gain. This means that as we go through steps and phases, 1, 2, 3, 4 pests will be made, and 1, 2, 3, 4 sapperlings will be made, meaning we have a fuck ton of these things spilling over into the other areas of our board to an obscene degree. And we can use these as mana when our turn comes up. But now we have a sack outlet. Now we can go ahead and win the game. Dina is out, and we can use Dina to do a couple of interesting things. We're going to pay 1 mana and sacrifice Gary away, burning our opponents for 2. Falconwrath Noble burns 1 opponent for 1. Mirkwood Bats burns them for 1 each. So we're doing 4 damage total, 2 damage to one person, 3 damage to another. Dina can sacrifice 1, 2, 3 more pests away. 1, 2, 3. And then we can use the Vat of Rebirth with 1, 2, 3 mana to get Gary back out on the board, spending the oil counters on the Vat of Rebirth. Now that we've done that, Gary pops out on the board, burning our opponents for another 9 damage. This means we are in a super powerful spot. Also, because Insidious Roots allows each of our pests and sapperlings to tap for their own mana, from this point on, we can just tap and then sacrifice a pest. Tap and then sacrifice a pest. Meaning we can go through all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We can get rid of 14, 15, 16. We can get rid of 15 of our pests and sapperlings, leaving only the 2 that have Summoning Sickness on the board. By getting rid of all 15 of these, we are going to burn our opponents for 15 total on each of them, and then we have 15 we can throw anywhere we want with the Falconwrath Noble, potentially just ending the game for 1 player because they're taking 30 life. After this, we can just kind of sit pretty. If we end our turn, our opponents are going to burn to death from Verdant Force and Beledros, spawning more tokens. We can also untap all of our lands and sacrifice more creatures with Dina Soulsteeper to just win the game that way. And remember, as we end our turn, we will draw our 1 card with Death Reap Ritual, which happens to be a Zulaport Cutthroat. If we play that on a following turn, we have overkill in damage. On turn 8, we've burned our opponents out, and I know this deck can do this consistently because I've had to make this video 3 separate times, and I've had to demonstrate this shit 3 separate times. And when I do these playtests, I don't stack the cards, I just play the deck out. So it's done this every time, either on turn 8 or turn 9, so I know this deck can do what it needs to do. Anyway, what happened if you had a little more money to throw into it? If you plan on upgrading this deck build, there are a few things I would highly suggest. The very first ones being throw in some MDFCs. Cards like Malakir Rebirth and Balaged Recovery do a lot of work in smoothing out the deck, as sometimes we just don't want to see as many lands as we've put into the deck, and we want them to be able to pull double duty. Adding in more ramp like Farseek and Nature's Lore will be incredibly helpful as well in getting dual lands out of the deck and making sure that we have better, more mana-efficient ramp spells in the deck. Adding removal spells like Assassin's Trophy and Beast Within will help the deck deal with more threats more consistently. Adding in better burn options like Blood Artist and Iara First of Locthwain will benefit really well with the pests. Iara also has a sack outlet attached to it that can help out a ton. Speaking of sack outlets, cards like Ashnod's Altar and Skull Clamp will be doing double duty, both giving us mana and draw effectively while killing our pests on curve as we need it, and Chatterfang just does it all with having a sack outlet that also can make sure that we spawn extra tokens every single time we spawn tokens. And the big daddy of all sack outlets, Yawgmoth, can turn sacrificing any of our cards into both removal and card draw with a funny proliferate ability that is sometimes helpful, with Bolas' Citadel being one of the biggest upgrades you can throw into the deck, since all the life gain we have in the deck will benefit its explosive, stormy Aristocrat turns, with a win con built in, letting us sacrifice 10 non-land permanents to burn our opponents for 10 life if we happen to be in a position where we need that. All in all, this deck runs incredibly smooth on its own and is part of a legacy of failed decks I tried to build years ago and now understand way better than when I made them the first times around. That said, I hope you guys enjoyed, despite the fact that it took me several attempts to make this video actually work. I'm tired, my throat hurts, and I have to make a video about Zatalpa next, which, again, I've already recorded once, so I'm excited. I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am to do all of this over and over and over and over again. That all said, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to support me on Patreon, I would greatly appreciate it. But that said, maybe catch my streams over on twitch.tv/NecoSuris, where I'm streaming on every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Sometimes on Tuesdays when I can get the time. That all said, I hope to see you all in future videos. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full-time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full-time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.